Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 1st of March, 2021, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me via video link, we've got David Scott and also Vanessa Beeley. Welcome to you both. I'm just going to get straight on here because we've got a lot to cover today, as usual, and start off with mentioning the sad passing of Ian R. Crane. Now, we're going to have a little bit more about Ian later in the programme, but Ian passed away on Thursday last week, and that has there's been quite a lot of condolences from everybody. So thank you very much for those, and those will be passed along to Ian's family. You'll notice that Brian is not with me today, and that's because of another passing, and that is of Derek Bye. Derek, a long-time campaigner against medical malpractice, and in this case, he started on his campaigning because of his daughter Helena, who died following medical malpractice, and then he subsequently discovered that his daughter had body parts removed in order to try to cover the medical malpractice up. So there is an interview on the UK Column website if you have a look for UK Column Live Special, Paediatric and Drug Company Abuse. That was recorded quite a number of years ago. The Byes have been campaigning on behalf of their daughter and others for, since 1977, in fact. So bit of sad news to start, but we'll move on with events of the day. And we'll start off with variants, because variants are the big thing at the moment, the Brazil variant in particular. Now, why would variants be continuing to be important? Well, of course, as we reported, I believe, on Monday's programme last week, the lockdown would only be lifted, according to the government. What they had 4 measures, but the final one was only if our assessment of the risks is not fundamentally changed by new variants of concern. Now, this phrase, variants of concern, is very interesting. The BBC used it in their coverage this morning, but you'll notice that there's a capital V and a capital C on there. That was the government's, the way that they presented this. So we decided that we needed to label that as a trademark. They have decided to make this a trademark without question. Variants of concern is the phrase. Well, here is the wonderful Nadeem Zahawi, who's the vaccines minister, otherwise known as Anton LaVey. And he was saying this: we're working with several data points to try to locate this person. They could be asymptomatic. So the furore this morning is all about someone who took a test but didn't fill in the form to give their details. And so somebody has tested positive among a handful of people that have tested positive for this Brazilian variant. But one person has tested positive that can't be tracked down, and this is causing a massive furore. Now, of course, where did these variants come from in the first place? This is the question that we would like answered. And let's just remind ourselves that Trevor Bedford said a few weeks ago, after around 10 months of relative quiescence, we've started to see some striking evolution of SARS-CoV-2 with a repeated evolutionary pattern in the SARS-CoV-2 variants of concern emerging from the UK, South Africa and Brazil. He said in SARS-CoV-2, the viral spike protein, in particular the receptor binding domain, is a locus for important viral evolution and is the primary target for the human immune response. My highly speculative hypothesis is that the emergence of these variant viruses arises in cases of chronic infection during which the immune system places great pressure on the virus to escape immunity, and the virus does so by getting really good at getting into cells. Okay, this issue of immunity escape is one that was being questioned around the time that the vaccines were being developed. Of course, when we look, we'll just remind ourselves, when we look at the government website and we ask, they're asking what do we know about the new COVID-19 variants. Of course, the variants are UK, South Africa and Brazil, as we mentioned a moment ago. And we have to remind ourselves that just by coincidence, and all we know at this point in time is that it is a coincidence, the primary analysis of efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine was based on cases coming from phase 3 UK, Brazilian and South African trials led by Oxford University and AstraZeneca. So, David, if I can welcome you to the programme first of all, and say, there is a question here about whether these so-called new variants, particularly the three, these variants of concern with a capital V and a capital C, have come about as a result of immunity escapes following the vaccine trials.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and the fact that it's the same three countries as the vaccine trials were conducted in is starting to stretch credibility if it's just a coincidence, because we're up in the 1 in a million chance, and that's where we should actually suspend the belief it's just a coincidence. And there are so many things we're being asked to believe that are just coincidence, including, as we'll come to later, spikes in deaths in the care homes immediately following the rollout of the vaccine. And whilst correlation is not causation, these things require an examination. And as for the new variants, it all seems to be smoke and mirrors at the moment. There's suggestions that they're more threatening. There's suggestions that the vaccines don't work. There's suggestions that they might be more deadly, or they might be more contagious, or they might be more something. There doesn't seem to be anything really known, but yet this will be sufficient justification for prolonging the lockdown.
That's certainly how it seems to be. Now, let's move on to testing. We've got the news today, good news, that families and households with primary school, secondary school and college-age children, including childcare and support bubbles, they're going to be able to test ourselves at least twice a week from home, because we're going to get free tests. We're going to get these free tests from the government. These are going to be lateral flow tests. So children going back to school, certainly in secondary school, are going to be given 3 tests in school. This is from March the 8th. And then following those 3 tests in school, they will move to a home testing regime. But it seems not just the children, but also the parents. So I wonder why that would be. David, do you suspect, again, justification for continuing lockdown?
Well, the testing's not reliable, so the more testing you've got, the more positive cases you've got. There's now pressure being applied to all school teachers to carry out tests themselves and to certify their own tests and report back to the state their own health condition on a regular basis, multiple times a week. This is a huge data grab that we're all being invited to volunteer for, but it's free, so free stuff from the government. What could go wrong?
I can't imagine. Now, let's have a look at this. This is from the BBC website. It's Panorama. It's Saving Syria's Children. And this, of course, was released in 2013 in order to try to justify or try to encourage the general public to support bombing of Syria at the time. Sadly, it didn't work. The reason you'll see why I'm bringing this up in a second, but here is a blog from Robert Stewart, blog site run by Robert Stewart, Fabrication in BBC Panorama Saving Syria's Children. And I want to highlight this particular post, which is entitled Conflicting Accounts of First Victim and Other Discrepancies in Accounts by Dr. Saleha Hassan, Dr. Rola Hallam and Ian Pennell. Ian Pennell working for the BBC, the 2 doctors apparently working on the ground in Syria at the time. And so Robert making the point that at 31 minutes in Saving Syria's Children, Dr. Saleha Hassan is shown attending the first alleged victim, a baby accompanied by his father. Ian Pennell's narration at this point states, "No one's quite sure what happened. Only subsequently do the dozens of other alleged victims begin to arrive. This sequence of events is portrayed in several other accounts, including others given by Dr. Hassan." And of course, the victims were allegedly of a napalm bombing. However, Robert goes on to say, in an interview with Australian broadcaster ABC on 27th of November 2013, Dr. Hassan gives an entirely contradictory account. So why are we bringing this up now? Well, it turns out that this morning, the very same Dr. Hassan, who is now apparently working in South Wales for the NHS, has published this, or is taking part in a Channel 4 documentary under the Dispatches series. Dispatches, we filmed inside our COVID wards to ensure that the NHS what the NHS went through is never forgotten. So she's saying, if we keep our glass half full, we see that flu cases have almost vanished. With mask wearing, social distancing and hand hygiene, we've inadvertently found a way to protect ourselves from our seasonal visitor. Every winter we care for patients coughing and spluttering with flu-like symptoms and then anticipate our own bout. It had become almost an annual occurrence, the only uncertainty being when, not if. But we will never forget, she says, in years to come, when we've moved on to different jobs and places, we'll always remember who we stood by and when we fought this battle. Now, of course, the question, if I can welcome Vanessa onto the programme now. Vanessa, the question that comes to my mind, first of all, is will she be moving on to different jobs? Because it seems to me that she's got a career built in government propaganda here.
Well, in crisis acting. I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't mock the BBC, but then again, they do invite it.
Well,
I mean, seriously, I think I commented on Twitter today that the BBC has ceased to be remotely fit for purpose. It is effectively the Saatchi and Saatchi of the British government, connected to British intelligence, in my opinion.
Yes, well, it's a fair enough opinion now, but of course this particular program is Channel 4, and actually, when we come to discussions about Syria, yeah. BBC and Channel 4 very much been in the working in lockstep on these issues.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's not forget that the BBC researcher on the recent May Day series, Whitewash of the White Helmets, and James Le Mesurier, the former, or believed to be former MI6 founder of the White Helmets, used as a researcher Abd al-Qadir Habak, who had previously been showcased by Channel 4 in a production called Up Close with the Rebels, which they rapidly pulled when they realized that the rebel that they were up close with had, a few months previously, beheaded a 12-year-old child in Aleppo. And so the cross-reference there between the BBC and Channel 4, the use of UK Foreign Office trained citizen journalists and activists infiltrated into Syria to provide propaganda to criminalize the Syrian government were being used across the board by Channel 4. When I challenged the BBC on the use of Habak as a researcher and as a witness in the May Day series, their response to me, yeah, but lots of other channels used him. I mean, that was literally the BBC response to me. I've paraphrased it, but that's effectively their entire response when it's pointed out to them that a researcher, one, conflict of interest, he was trained by the British Foreign Office, not declared. Two, he had clearly worked with actual war crime committers in Syria, the beheaders of children.
Yes, well, of course, that's the type of excuse you hear from 5-year-old children. But anyway, let's move. We'll be coming back to this issue of the BBC in Syria later on in the programme. But let's move on to this. Now, Brian was talking about Shawadi Wadi promoting or encouraging vaccine take-up last week, David. But then we had the Queen.
The Queen is engaged in perhaps the least royal thing I've ever seen her do. So now she's another little box on a Zoom screen with many little boxes of people in video, and she's very lamely paying kind of lip service to the government policy and talking about irrelevances like the needle didn't hurt her arm when it went in, so that's okay. And quite bizarrely talking about how she felt psychologically better after having had the vaccine. Now, for someone in her position with the resources she has to hand, and presumably the research and the connections and the research capability and the connections that the palace have, there's really no excuse for her being less well informed than the average man or woman in the street, the average doctor or nurse administering this. We know a great many people have many serious concerns over the vaccine. We know what's been reported in the VAERS database, but it would appear that our monarch has never heard of any of this information, or if she has, felt it prudent just to toe the government line anyway.
Well, it's not just the Queen. In fact, the efforts to persuade people to take the vaccine in the UK are ramping up exponentially. The British Heart Foundation have now joined a campaign. Well, actually, they released this press release towards the end of last week, and they said 13 other health charities. It's now 16 other health charities. So we've got African Caribbean Leukemia Trust, Asthma UK, British Heart Foundation, British Liver Trust, British Lung Foundation, Cancer Research, Carers UK, Diabetes UK, Epilepsy Action, Kidney Care UK, Lupus UK, Macmillan Cancer Support, MenCap, MS Society, Sickle Cell Society, and Terence Higgins Trust, all trying to convince people to set aside their hesitancy, as they call it, and take the vaccine. Now, what's interesting about this is that none of these organisations to date have said anything, as far as I know, about the number of people that have died in the UK over the past year as a result of not receiving healthcare for the likes of cancer or heart conditions or these kinds of things. So there's that to be taken into account there when deciding whether you accept their message or not. But it's not just them. 38 Degrees have now decided that they are going to get on this as well. So did you see the news? COVID-19 vaccine has been proven to drastically reduce the number of people suffering from serious illness and hospitalization, as well as saving lives. It's excellent news. We could soon be seeing our loved ones again, and life could start getting back to normal. So again, we're offered the idea of hope. Well, look, 38 Degrees in particular, this is a bit of an aside, but I did want to just mention this and get Vanessa's thoughts on it. Because one of the other things that 38 Degrees is promoting at the moment is this: ban the import of cotton from Xinjiang region. And they're saying the government of China is perpetrating human rights abuses on a massive scale. And so on. Now, this, of course, is a narrative that's pushed very hard by the BBC, by Channel 4 and other mainstream press in the UK. But I just want to remind people, or maybe inform people if they don't know this, that in fact the Uyghur people in Xinjiang have been operating outside of China within places like Afghanistan, joining jihadists in Afghanistan. This is Deutsche Welle. What is driving the Uyghur Muslims to increasingly join the ranks of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But of course, it goes right back to when Russia was in Afghanistan and the CIA was encouraging the Mujahideen to fight the Soviet military. And if you look at or find this China article here on Springer Link, Retribution and Retaliation, Uyghur Separation and China's Security in Xinjiang. And again, they're making the point that the Uyghurs have been radicalized over the years. So they're saying Uyghur militants using fake Turkish passports to enter Afghanistan and Pakistan to join extremist groups and so on. The history of this, Vanessa, goes back many, many years, and it's something that most people aren't aware of, particularly if they're listening to the current anti-Chinese rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. The Uyghurs, I believe there are, figures vary, but conservatively there's around 25,000 Uyghur radicals fighting in Idlib alongside Al-Qaeda, which of course is one of the reasons that China in particular has been a sort of silent ally of Syria. Not a military ally as such, but it has provided vetoes at certain pivotal points in the conflict against Syria alongside Russia. And part of that reason, of course, just as Russia is containing their Chechen radical element inside Syria, China is containing the Uyghur radical element and trying to contain it in Syria and prevent it coming back to stir up trouble in Xinjiang. But the other point is, and I made this point to someone on social media the other day, if your country, if, for example, a radical element were to start up in somewhere like Kent, and they were power multiplied by a hostile nation to carry out terrorist attacks against the civilians of that province or that area of the country, what would you expect the government to do? Of course, in the case of our government in the UK, quite possibly they would arrest them, torture them, imprison them, incarcerate them, etc. Actually, what China is doing effectively is providing a de-radicalization program. Now, I haven't been to China. I haven't gone into those areas or compounds wherever they are trying to ensure de-radicalization. But this seems to me to be a very sensible policy to combat the radicalization that they know is being fomented yet again by the US. Why? To derail the Silk Road project, where the Xinjiang province basically it covers part of that project, the Silk Road project. So clearly this is about US economic and hybrid warfare against China. And of course, as soon as you see a narrative being amplified by organizations like the BBC, you should start questioning it.
Indeed. David, just before we move back to COVID matters, have you got any thoughts on this?
The degree to which the Chinese government is oppressive has certainly in the past been unlimited. Now it seems to be less so, and now it's no longer clear whether they're more oppressive to their people generally than we are to ours. The degree to which dissident views are suppressed in the UK, at the very least, rivals the degree to which they're suppressed in China. I think we have to get away from the casual assumption that the West is the paragon of virtue and the East is the location of despotism. That's not true anymore. We see it every day. Every time we try to go to the shops, we see this. And so all things must be examined much more carefully, and no lazy assumptions regarding the moral superiority of the West are any longer capable of being upheld.
Yes, indeed. Right, thank you for that. Now let's come back to the UK then, and Peter Hitchens. This has turned out to be a somewhat controversial article by Peter Hitchens in the Mail on Sunday. So the title is "I've had the COVID jab, and it has cost me, and all it cost me was my freedom." So let's just have a look at some of the things that he says here. First of all, "So sorry, Your Majesty, but I've had my first COVID vaccination for wholly selfish reasons. A very important part of my family now lives abroad, and I'm deeply tired of not being able to see them. I get the strong sense that any sort of travel will be impossible if I don't have the necessary vaccine certificate. So I've been more or less forced to have an immunisation I would not otherwise have bothered with." He said, "For me, the vaccination was a gloomy submission to a new world of excessive safety and regulation. I tried to fight against it, but I lost." And he says, "So we are just going to be under the we are just going to be under surveillance a lot more, recorded a lot more, and bossed about a lot more." And he ended up by saying, "And if you think COVID is as dangerous as them, I certainly don't want to put you off the jab. Indeed, I don't want you to put off in any way. It's your business and not mine." So he's talking about it being a personal decision about whether to have it or not. David, I'm just what are your thoughts on this? Many people have been disappointed that Peter Hitchens has written this particular blog post.
Yes, and I must admit I was disappointed when I first heard that they'd done this, because the essential issue here is that your actions define you. Talk is cheap. The nature of humanity is talk is cheap. People put forward all sorts of opinions, all sorts of high ground is claimed, all sorts of virtue is signalled. But when push comes to shove, What do they do? When they go into the shop, what do they buy? When they live their lives, how do they live it? What decisions do they actually make? So what this is doing is whatever words that it's surrounded with, Peter Hitchens is saying to the state, I will comply. You will introduce additional tyranny and I will comply. Now, we all have sympathy for anyone who is in any of the huge variety of difficult situations with relatives, with travel being difficult, with huge, for many people, huge financial pressures. And no one's going to go and point the finger and say you are an insufficient human being, and I, in those circumstances, would have done it better. Because no one can say that. You don't walk a mile in the other man's shoes. But it's nonetheless disappointing that his actions have said that in the final analysis, he will yield to the power of the state. What did he describe it as? The New Jerusalem, in which we allow the state to boss us around even more in the name of our own good. It's now coming into being, he says. So, he's pointing at the religious aspects of this, the utopian aspects of this, and the totalitarian aspects of this, in all of which he's right. But it's just disappointing he's doing it against the background of saying, from his point of view, there's nothing can be done, and he is essentially surrendering to it.
Vanessa, you've had a bit of communication with him over the last few hours on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have to say it's the first time Peter Hitchens has ever engaged with me publicly on Twitter. And I think it was in reply to one of his tweets that I just said, well, I know what it was. He put out some spurious polls, presumably fortifying his position that resistance was futile. And so my comment basically is, well, all right, for that you're going to throw for some ridiculous government-funded poll, which we know to be spurious in the extreme, you're going to throw the resistance under the bus. And I simply said, well, better we know now than later, which then prompted him to reply, I think, 3 tweets to me, one in which was virtue signaling about his efforts against Tony Blair, Iraq, and so on. And as my response was, well, that makes it even more disappointing that you're throwing the towel in right now. His final tweet, and I'll read this out: liberty is unpopular in this country, according to Peter Hitchens. I thought the lockdown policy so outrageous and ill-founded that this might change. After 11 months of unrelenting combat, well done, Peter. Good job Syria didn't give up after 11 months of unrelenting combat from the imperialist bloc. I have to admit I was wrong. Liberty is still unpopular, perhaps for Hitchens, but not for many others in the UK. I see no point in pretending otherwise. Look, a number of people came back to me and said, yes, but it's his personal choice if he wants to take the vaccine. I completely agree, but don't make your choice public. Do not make your choice a way of surrendering publicly and persuading others, in other words, your followers, that it is futile to resist, that what is coming, the wave of totalitarian fascism that is coming, is unstoppable. And that's effectively what he's done as a powerful influencer on social media and in the media. And for that reason, I find it disappointing, not surprising. Let's move on, because clearly he no longer represents the values we all uphold as fighting for freedom, as resistance against what is a global power grab by the parasite predator class. I'm not abandoning those principles, and the majority of his followers, when you read the replies to him, are not abandoning it. So leave him, let him surrender to it. That's his choice.
But of course, it's not just David. It's not just a question of liberty. That's a very big part of it. But there's also the question of what has the effect of the lockdown policy been in terms of the health mental health, the health care in this country, and how many of the people that have sadly died in the last 12 months have died as a result of coronavirus, and how many have died as a result of the lockdown policy. And I think we've made a case on that.
We have repeatedly, be it suicide, be it untreated cancer, be it the virtual suspension of the NHS, and certainly the isolation of all the care homes and old folks' homes from any substantive medical support whatsoever during the first lockdown. This has caused enormous numbers of lives.
Which brings us on to deaths in Scottish care homes. Go ahead.
Yes, this graph I picked up from Twitter. The originator, as far as I can determine, is a Joel Smalley, who assembled the graph from the information provided on the Scottish Government's own website. The graph links to the original data produced by the Scottish Government. And I certainly know from looking at that data, the trends shown in this graph are accurate. And what it shows is a huge wave of COVID-related deaths following 2 to 3 weeks after the wave of the COVID vaccinations going through the care homes. The relationship between the two is most striking and really requires a thorough study and explanation. This looks on the face of it like the COVID vaccination has been killing people in care homes.
Well, where does that take us then?
Well, one other graph that I thought this was very good. It shows against an index of how stringent the lockdown and anti-COVID measures introduced by the state is, plotted against the death rate for COVID, or in this case, cases. There was two graphs. This one's cases. There's another one for deaths, which is very similar. And what it shows is, firstly, a huge scatter, so there's not any tightly correlated relationship. But if you draw a best fit line, the line goes up. That means the more stringent the lockdown policies, the more cases and the more deaths there are. And the best thing, as is so often the case, the best thing the government could have done was go fishing and do nothing. That would have seen the fewest numbers of deaths. That's what that graph indicates.
Yes, and well, that takes us on to another image, well, you're going to have to explain this one.
Yes, I just wanted to give an indication of A, resistance, and B, the knowledge of what we're dealing with here. This is a still image from a demonstration in Tel Aviv in Israel. We'll be covering this in an interview with Gilad Atzmon to be published tomorrow. Israel has the most advanced COVID vaccination program and has been the most stringent state in applying lockdown processes and lockdown restrictions upon its population. It is the guinea pig. They've made their people the guinea pigs for the world COVID policy. And they have what's termed a green passport. That's a vaccine passport that you get if you've had COVID and you're now viewed as immune, or if you've had both parts of the vaccination injection. So what this is a sign that shows the green passport, and an arrow that this leads to the yellow star, and an arrow that this leads to having numbers tattooed on your forearm. And from a crowd demonstrating in Tel Aviv, I thought that showed a correct understanding of the severity of the situation, and a criticism that is unanswerable.
We should just note, David, and remind everybody, of course, that Piers Corbyn has been arrested and a number of weeks ago, obviously out on bail, for making a similar point in a slightly different way. That type of point is considered not appropriate in this country.
Well, so many things now, we'll come to this again later in the news, so many avenues of legitimate opinion are now being criminalised. that our freedoms are visibly ebbing by the day.
Yes, indeed. Right, now if you like what the UK Column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, and there are options to join us there. That would be very much appreciated. And do share our material on the various platforms. And as you'll notice that we are on Odyssey now as well as the others. Now let's come back onto Ian R. Crane. Now Ian, of course, stalwart campaigner for many, many years. He ran the Alternative View conferences each year, but a lot of people aren't aware that prior to that he was speaking on a regular basis, public speaking. He has done so much over the years to encourage people to try to understand the world they're living in to a degree. Now, the last thing that he did, of course, and the thing that he became quite well known for was as the man in the field. So let's just have a brief listen or watch of one of his live streams from the field.
Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, the 9th of February, 2018. Or if you prefer, I believe it's day 1886. Frack free in the UK since the moratorium was lifted on Thursday, not Friday, Thursday, the 13th of December 2012. And I'm back here in the southwest of England and have been here for a week catching up on some other stuff and some research. And it's a wonderful morning. All the clouds are natural this morning. It's a beautiful sunrise and the bird song is just glorious.
And that really sums him up a lot, because no matter how bad things got, he always kept a joviality about him. He was brilliant for this. Now, of course, one of the things, a long-time anti-fracking campaigner, he approached me in, I think it was late 2013, and asked if I would help him produce a number of programs for streaming out on the internet. One of those became Fracking Nightmare, and from 2013 until 2018, pretty much almost every week he was back in, no matter where he was in the country, he was back in the studio to record Fracking Nightmare. The fracking campaign owes Ian Crane a lot. Now, so let's just look at another short piece of video here. Now, this is from David Ellison. Thank you very much for this, David. And Ian is speaking in the pub after they won the court case which Quadrilla was attempting to bring, which would have forced fracking campaigners into a protest pen in a field behind a hedge rather than on the road, blocking the machinery trying to get into the frack site. So just have a listen to this.
Today, though, you've actually kind of put yourself in the firing line as well. I mean, when you stood up in court today and put this case forward, the judge made it quite clear that you would be eligible for any costs and such like as well. I'd be there, looking at costs and things. How does that affect you when you're told something like that? I mean, it's quite scary, really, isn't it?
Well, potentially, but I had the same situation, ironically, I think it is exactly 3 years ago, when we challenged the IGAS attempt to evict the camp from Barton Moss. And there we did have legal representation, and I'm, again, recognising the contribution that Lindsay Johnson made and Lee Day, who commissioned Lindsay. He did an absolutely outstanding job. Although we lost the hearing, he was successful in getting an appeal, and the appeal date was set for July, so the bottom line was that the camp was left unmolested for the whole duration of the Barton Moss campaign.
Result?
Another result. And then in East Yorkshire, I challenged Raffin Energy. In fact, I was trying to get their eviction hearing moved from London to Hull. That was rejected, and the judge did award costs against me. And I think it's now sort of fairly common knowledge that Raffin pursued me for 18 months before they managed to get me in court. And then, I won't bore you with all the details, but after 7 court hearings, let's put it this way, as far as wrestling are concerned, are bankrupt. So the bottom line is that on the basis that I'm bankrupt, Quadrilla would have been chasing blood out of a proverbial stone. So in making me bankrupt, the industry have effectively created a situation where I don't have anything to lose, so I can contest anything and everything.
And he did at every opportunity. David Ellison just mentioned this to me as just before we came on air, so I thought it was really appropriate. The general may have gone, but Ian's army march on relentless. Ian woke a large number of people up to what's happening and encouraged them to stand up against it. His work within the anti-fracking campaign played a large part in its success, and I would echo that. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, like you, I'll miss him. Larger than life character, a lightness and a drive and a passion that is inspirational, and his work, which will go on, was tremendous. I mean, he did so much, and he carried some movements when there was very little sign of resistance being mounted, and he got messages out, and he built mass protests, not single-handed, but his contribution was immense.
Absolutely. And Vanessa, you got any thoughts?
No, I mean, just the same, really. Just a large. I mean, I only met him a few times, but what a powerhouse, and what a complete dedication to whatever cause he picked up, and an inspiration to anyone that worked with him. A tremendous guy, and he'll be greatly missed, but I'm sure he's in a better place than we are right now.
Well, that may well be the case, but as David said, his legacy will continue. The Alternative View conferences will continue, and there is a team of people working on that on this year's Alternative View conference, and they absolutely have the UK column's 100% support. So that is going to happen this year, and we look forward to it. Let's head over to Syria then, Vanessa, and. Well, of course, the first thing, as Patrick reported briefly at the end of Friday's programme, the first thing Joe Biden has done has been to bomb Syria. So this is Kevork Almassian's tweet saying Biden bombed the border control point near Abu Kamal to send a message to Syria, Iraq and Iran that this trade route will not be active before a grand compromise. So bring us up to date on this.
Well, 40 days into Biden's presidency, he violates international law. I mean, I haven't checked it up against every single other president that has gone before him, but of course their expertise is in violating international law while sitting on the UN Security Council. So basically, Biden issued instructions for the US Air Force to bomb Abu Kamal on the border with Iraq. In theory, and the astounding thing was how this was basically spewed out as justification for this violation of international law by every single NATO-aligned, state-aligned media in the US and in the UK, including, of course, the BBC, that this was in retaliation against an attack on a US occupation base inside Iraq, well inside Iraq, nowhere near the Syria border, because of the injury to, I think, 4 or 5 US contractors and the death of 1. Now, this despite the fact that, of course, Iraq for some time, and that has increased since the assassination by Trump of Qasem Soleimani last year, Iraq has been demanding that the US vacate Iraq and take their military with them. And as Peter Ford pointed out, the military itself is no longer an asset inside Iraq. It is a liability for the US. And as Peter Ford also said to me, were Biden a statesman, he would have ignored the attack on Erbil in Iraq. He would have used it as a reason to get Iran back to the table on the nuclear deal that he claims he wants to return to, that of course was abandoned pretty much by Trump. And he would have used it as some kind of negotiation pawn in the chess game with Iran over negotiations. In fact, what he's done is to demonstrate his weakness. He's obviously been pressured by the neocon elements within his administration, no great surprise there. And he's carried out an attack with the flimsy justification that, one, it was in retaliation, two, it is a preemptive strike against Iranian proxies. By the way, one Iraqi PMU soldier was killed in this attack. No Iranian militia were killed in this attack. The PMU has been instrumental in fighting ISIS inside Iraq and on the border with Syria. So effectively, Biden wiped out one of the Iraqi military unit members that has been consistently fighting ISIS, that the US and the UK claim to be fighting inside Syria.
So we have a couple of images here. I mean, the damage, was it particularly targeted?
The damage, the infrastructure damage was considerable. Yes, right. As I said, one life was lost, not the 17 or 22 lives that were claimed again by Pentagon-aligned media, which included, again, the BBC, which, of course, just basically spewed out everything they were told to say about the attack and did no investigation whatsoever. But that applies across the board to the media.
How close was this to the military base?
It was a long way. I can't remember the exact kilometers, but was it 300, more than 300?
Yeah, certainly. It says there would be a. It says it would be a 6-hour journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay.
So you know, but as I say, this whole pretext of a war with Iran, which of course is being stoked by Israel, and yes, thank you. You brought up the fact that the US has officially now brought Israel into CENTCOM. Now I say officially because, of course, Israel has been driving US military adventurism in the region since its existence. But now it has been made official. The US brings Israel into CENTCOM to make decisions effectively on the targets in the region. And that will include, of course, Iranian militia. I'm using Israeli terminology now, in Syria. The other thing, of course, and which is very interesting, what this effectively means, if you read that actual report, is a formalization of the alliance between Sunni Islam, Israel, Saudi Arabia and the US, which is what I've been predicting for some time, that Israel will openly ally itself with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Wahhabi terrorist elements that have been destabilizing Syria for the last 10 years in order to form an official front against what they perceive to be a threat against Israeli security, which is Iran. But this will not be a war against Iran directly. This will be a pretext to ramp up the aggression against Syria on the basis that they are targeting Iranian proxies inside Syria and on the border with Iraq and inside Iraq. Of course, as the PMU are perceived by the US and Israel as an Iranian proxy. And just on the back of that, last night, there were further Israeli attacks to the south of Damascus.
Which, of course, complete silence about in the British and other Western mainstream press.
I challenge you to find a report on that in the BBC.
Yes, indeed. Okay, thanks for that. Stay with us, Vanessa, because we're going to be coming back to the BBC and you personally in a few minutes. But David, let's come back to Scotland. And of course, the Salmon Inquiry is finally starting to get some traction in the mainstream press. But we're going to kick off with a wonderful image of Nicola Sturgeon.
Isn't it great? This is all-round Scottish political media and political Twitter at the moment. And in fact, quite a number of people have been adopting this as the profile pictures online. So there we go, a wonderful image of Nicola Sturgeon. And it's been quite a week for her. Finally, we had Alex Salmond before the Salmon Inquiry, and the inquiry into the mishandling of the allegations of abuse made by civil servants within the Scottish Government concerning Mr. Salmond. And this first clip we have here is his introductory comments to the inquiry.
Well, look, just before we do show that, just very briefly, why is this a problem for Nicola Sturgeon?
There are many aspects to this. There's some simple things like she seems to have lied to Parliament, in which case she has to resign. There is very firm evidence that the name of one of the complainers was handed over to Alex Salmond's team by Nicola Sturgeon's team very early in the process, and that name should have been kept confidential. So that's a betrayal of the woman who made the complaint. But it goes much deeper, because we see corruption showing up within the Crown Office, whose conduct has been just unbelievable, as they've constantly acted and used their power as both the government's legal advisor and the home of all criminal prosecution in Scotland, to target people trying to bring evidence to a parliamentary inquiry, to silence people, to redact information, to prevent the inquiry having information. So it all starts to look like this horrendous cover-up. The relationship and the conduct of the Scottish Civil Service, senior people in the Scottish Civil Service, especially Leslie Evans, the head of the service, again look to be utterly indefensible. And all through this time, Nicola Sturgeon has presided over the entire mess and has the view that there's nothing to see here, move along, and her position is becoming ever more untenable, and the cries for her to resign are growing louder by the day.
Okay, so let's just have a look at the first little bit from Alex Salmond here.
Thank you very much, Convener. 3 important points require to be made at the outset. Firstly, this inquiry is not about me. I've already established the illegality of the actions of the Scottish Government in the Court of Session, and I've been acquitted of all criminal charges by jury in the highest court in the land. These are both the highest courts in the land, the highest civil court and the highest criminal court. The remit for this inquiry is about the actions of others. There's an investigation into the conduct of ministers, the permanent secretaries, civil servants and special advisers. It also requires to shine a light on the activities of the Crown Office and to examine the unacceptable conduct of those who appear to have no understanding of the importance of separation of party and government and prosecution authorities, and indeed of the rule of law itself. It was the government who were found to have been acted unlawfully, unfairly and tainted by apparent bias. I note that the First Minister asserts that I have to prove a case. I don't. That has already been done. There have been 2 court cases, 2 judges, 1 jury. In this inquiry, it's the Scottish Government, a government which has already admitted to behaving unlawfully, who are under examination.
So he's very much highlighting the destruction of separation of powers in Scotland.
Yes, a destruction that he is himself culpable in, and he promoted. Named person, for example, was started under his watch, and was a huge blurring of the line between the private and the public, between what is no one else's business but your own, and what the state can intervene in. So he is, to some extent, reaping what he's sown, but he's perfectly correct in the nature of the problem is that the lines between party, state, which is a territorial monopolist of violence, and the state prosecutor, which uses the entire criminal justice system, those lines are blurred, and the rule of law in Scotland is essentially no longer operating. So, you know, these are significant points and illustrates just the magnitude of the problem that's been shown by this crisis. Now, this crisis has been created under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, albeit the problems we're seeing here date back long before this, and long before the Scottish National Party were running the government as well, to be fair. These are long-standing problems. But Nicola Sturgeon's role in this and her leadership style, this is very much in question. Now, the next clip gets to that.
I watched in astonishment on Wednesday when the First Minister of Scotland, used a COVID press conference, to effectively question the result of a jury. Still, I said nothing. Well, today, that changes.
Now, the degree to which this decision by Nicola Sturgeon to go after Alex Salmon in that venue and in that way is beyond the pale has to be seen to be believed. The next clip is Nicola's press conference.
I do worry about not just the women in this case, whose voices have been silenced, whose motives have been maligned, who've been accused, or it seems to me to be accused of being liars and conspiracists, and I think that is wrong. They came forward with complaints. The behaviour they complained of was found by a jury not to constitute criminal conduct, and Alex Salmon is innocent of criminality, but that doesn't mean that the behaviour they claimed of didn't happen.
Now, I want just to emphasise what just happened there. Nicola Sturgeon said, the jury doesn't decide on facts. No, the facts are incontestable. Because an allegation's been made, that's it. These things happened. And what the jury does, and the Crown Office apparently couldn't do, is the jury decides whether they're actually criminal. One of the allegations was attempted rape. Is she trying to suggest that the Crown Office had no idea whether attempted rape is criminal and the jury decided it wasn't? It's insane. She's saying that the jury decides you're not guilty, and she can go up in front of the world's press the next day and say, well, you did these things. It's just that the jury didn't think it passed the bar for criminality. But you're still guilty. You still did them. This is taking the entire process of jury-led law and trashing it. This is a leader going so far beyond her authority, she can't even see her authority anymore. It was a remarkable outburst. Now, sorry, want to go?
No, you go ahead.
So Alex Salmon continues, and he's talking about the degree to which the matters at hand are significant, and the degree to which the failure reflects on the leadership in Scotland. So
But the reason I'm here today is because we can't turn that page nor move on until the decision-making which is undermining the system of government in Scotland is addressed. The competence and professionalism of the civil service matters. The independence of the Crown Office as acting in the public interest matters. Acting in accordance with legal advice matters. Concealing evidence from the courts matters. The duty of candour of public authorities matters. Democratic accountability through Parliament matters. Suppressing evidence from parliamentary committees matters. And yes, ministers telling the truth to Parliament matters. The day such things come to not matter would be a dark and dangerous one for Scotland.
Now, the point that we've been making repeatedly over the last years is that these things do no longer matter to the powers that be in Scotland, and we are in those dark and dangerous times. Alex Salmon at least now has some inkling of that. But he goes on to talk about the leadership issue now.
Some people say that the failures of these institutions, the blurring of the boundaries between party, government and prosecution service, mean that Scotland is in danger of becoming a failed state. I disagree. The Scottish civil servant hasn't failed. Its leadership has failed. The Crown Office hasn't failed. Its leadership has failed. Scotland hasn't failed. Its leadership has failed.
Now, here he's talking about the reality that we are not our government and they are not us. But he's also showing a touching naivety if he thinks that the lawlessness doesn't go deep into the Scottish public society and public governance and all of our major institutions. The Crown Office has been called institutionally corrupt for 2 decades now, and with good reason. The sort of stitch-up that he's faced, things like trying to pause, it's called cyst in Scots law, trying to pause a civil case so that when you're going to lose, when you don't have a case, so that a criminal case, which you've orchestrated, comes along and makes the civil case of no account, or influences the civil case hugely. Well, we've seen that in the Fresh Start Foundation, that same game being played by local authorities across Scotland. This is standard operating procedure. It's not just a matter of leadership, so he's wrong there. But he's right in the next area where he recognises a pattern of behaviour.
The pattern is undeniable. The government refused to hand over documentation in the civil case. It required a commission to extract it from them. The Permanent Secretary was brought to give evidence under oath just to extract documents she had a duty to provide to the court. The government ignored the provisions of a search warrant in the criminal case, and despite the impact on the administration of justice, still withheld key documents which should have been put before the jury. This committee has been blocked and tackled at every turn with calculated and deliberate suppression of key evidence. Even Parliament, our Scottish Parliament, has been defied despite 2 votes demanding the external legal advice that the public have paid for. My evidence has been published, then subsequently censured by intervention of the Crown Office, evidence that they had previously agreed was lawful. And even today, I appear before you under the explicit threat of prosecution if I reveal evidence for which the committee has asked. Not to fulfil my oath and tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth would be a contempt. But Crown Office says it might lead to prosecution. People should just stop and think for a moment about that. The ability of any witness before any Parliament to tell the truth and fulfil their oath is effectively being questioned by the Crown Office. The truth is those that now demand to see evidence have invested a great deal of time and public money in attempting to hide that evidence.
Now, those who are who are demanding evidence now, that means Nicola Sturgeon. And Nicola Sturgeon has led a government that has used, for example, the power of the Crown Office to threaten people to prevent them telling the truth under oath to a parliamentary inquiry. Any other country, she would be gone. If that happened in Westminster, the MPs, weak as they are, would rise up. And it's been happening in Scotland for years, and only now is some realisation of the severity of the situation starting to become more widely known. So that's where we're at. Mr. Salmon did finish off with an offer to the committee to say all these bits of information, all these documents that you've been trying to get, that you can't get from the government and the Crown Office are barring you access to. Why don't you send an order to my lawyers for these? My lawyers would be delighted to give you all the documents. And in fact, the documents preventing me releasing the documents, you could ask for them too. We'll give you the lot. And you can have them by Monday morning. So we'll see what happens there. I think that's called dynamite fishing. And we'll see Nicola Sturgeon will be up this week in front of the same committee and going back to her line that there's nothing to see here and that Alex Salmon is a liar. I'd have to say he came across extremely well in that committee. There was quite a number of SNP members on the committee who were extremely hostile to him. He handled that very well, and he was convincing.
I have to say there's probably a few people within the Scottish establishment that would be critical of China, and bearing in mind the state of government in Scotland at the moment, I don't think they're really in a position.
No, and there's, I mean, so many questions we've got. Coming up shortly, there's going to be another, this will be the third demand for some of the documents which have been withheld from that committee to be handed over to the committee. Now, the committee members have seen them, they know what's in them, they know they're vital. But unless, the way the committee works, unless they are officially published by the committee, they cannot be referred to in any way in the final report. It's as if they do not exist. This week we'll see the third attempt to have a vote of no confidence against the Deputy First Minister who's blocking the release of these documents, John Swinney, to see if they can remove him from office. We will see. It all depends on the Green Party and whether they continue to support the SNP. John Swinney, also please watch the UK column later in the week. We'll have an article on John Swinney and his relationship with the Crown Office and further attempts to pervert the course of justice, and I hope everyone watches for that. The ongoing scenario will continue. One of the things, though, that we will be coming back to is the case made and published on a website by Robert Green regarding the relationship between the current Permanent Secretary, Leslie Evans, and the case against Dame Elise Angelini. Now, Dame Elise Angelini is one of the people who oversee the ministerial code. She is charged with investigating the ministers if there's any wrongdoing. She is the ultimate end stop to make sure that there's no sign of any corruption in Scottish public life at the very highest levels. But Leslie Evans is preventing us from seeing the documentation that Dame Elise Angelini put forward to claim £64,000 worth of government money so she could carry out a defamation case against Robert Green over the Holly Gregg affair. Robert Green believed, and I think with good reason, that statement made to justify those funds may well have included falsehoods. And if it did, that would mean that Dame Elise Angelini, who's charged with overseeing the ministerial code and making sure everything's above board, is herself part of the corrupt Scottish state. But we don't know if that's the case because Leslie Evans, the Permanent Secretary, won't even talk to us about releasing the document that needs to be there, that should be a matter of public record, and that there's a huge public interest in seeing.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, David, thank you very much for that. We'll keep a very close eye on it. Now, let's just end with ethics in journalism. And the BBC, of course, a number of weeks ago, in fact, in November, published a series of podcasts called Mayday. And I believe it was episode 4 featured Vanessa quite heavily. In fact, it may have been all about her. Well, this series of podcasts has now been followed up with an article on the BBC called Mayday, How the White Helmets and James Le Mesurier got pulled into a deadly battle for truth. And the first thing to note about it is how much content there seems to be from Emma Winberg, Le Mesurier's wife, and lots of images of happier times, perhaps. But nonetheless, it doesn't take long before they start getting back onto the target, which of course is Vanessa. But one thing that was very interesting was they decided to publish an image of a pink Volkswagen Beetle, which they described as Vanessa Beeley's car. And when that image was published, initially, the number plate was absolutely readable. Well, the first thing to clarify, Vanessa, is this your car?
Well, as I said in my email to Chloe Hadjimatthew and Emma Rippon, who's her line manager, I also contacted Hugh Levinson, who's higher up the tree than Emma Rippon. He referred me back to Emma Rippon after I emailed all three. That in Syria, it's impossible for a foreign national to buy or own a car. So therefore, no, this car is owned by a Syrian civilian. I use it on a daily basis as my car. But by publishing this image with the surrounding context in the BBC article, they have drawn attention to both myself, but also, as you rightly said, they initially published the actual number plate. So it's very easy to trace the actual owner of the vehicle, who is a colleague of mine.
Because
So
that's public record.
It effectively puts both of us at risk.
Sorry, that is public record in Syria.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So look, David, this looks to me like a line has been significantly crossed. So just before I show the email and the response that I sent to Chloe, what are your thoughts?
Well, here we have a controversial journalist speaking who's writing and working in a charged political area in the middle of what the BBC describe as a civil war. My thoughts are they're putting Vanessa's life at risk.
I find it, I think I'll go a little bit further. I find it very hard to assume that wasn't the intention, because the BBC has over the years been very careful to make sure that, for example, when they've been outside Jeremy Corbyn's house, that you don't see the address specifically, that you don't see the number plates of cars and so on. This seems like normal journalistic practice. But look, this is what I sent to the BBC on Saturday. Dear Chloe, could you please provide answers to the following questions? Please consider this an on-the-record media inquiry. With respect to the article, exactly what contribution did Emma Winberg make to the content of the article? What legal advice was taken before publication of the article? Did you and your editors discuss the implications of publishing an image of the car on a major article such as this, particularly but not limited to implications for Vanessa's personal safety? If such discussions took place, what conclusions were reached? And what policies does the BBC have in place with regard to the display of car number plates for vehicles owned by the subject of BBC content? Deadline for answers is midday on Monday, and this is Chloe's response on screen. As you can see, complete silence. We have tumbleweed, and so that is it. I don't really know what more to say. I'm assuming that at some point, Vanessa, they will actually respond to that. Or maybe not, maybe they don't want to, but what interested me was that not long after that email went in, they did blur out the number plate, but of course by that stage it was already doing the rounds of social media.
Yeah, and it's been picked up, of course, by the usual suspects like Idris Ahmed, etc., what I call NATO thugs on social media, and of course they're running with it. So that alone, of course, provides greater targeted harassment. And I actually put in my email, it appears very much as the intended result would be that I would be targeted, or the owner of the car would be targeted inside Syria. Prove me wrong. And I am tomorrow morning speaking to a lawyer in the UK to take this further, because, the BBC effectively consistently bullies those that challenge the Foreign Office narrative in every possible arena, but particularly on Syria. And at some point, we as the minnows in this, we don't have the backing or the resources that BBC journalists have. I mean, effectively, they are totally protected. They can break the law, they can break their own ethical code, they can violate their own guidelines, because they know they are protected by one of the most powerful media institutions in the world. We don't have that protection, but at the same time, when a wrong is committed, we have the right to challenge that wrong, and I will be doing so, and I have informed them that I will be doing so.
And yes, and so for anybody in doubt, Ofcom actually covers this. So Ofcom is normally about broadcast media, so anything that's broadcast on television or on radio. But actually in this case, they also cover material which is on the BBC website. So perhaps it might be appropriate to make a complaint to Ofcom and actually put them on the spot and see what their reaction is to this. David, look, we're absolutely out of time, but let's just end with this image.
Yes, this is Sturgeon and Salmon and the never-ending circle of attack as seen by a cartoonist, and that rather sums up this week, although perhaps a little unfair to Alex Salmond, who seems to be at least in part realising the nature of the Scottish state and the magnitude of the issues that are actually involved.
Yes. Okay, look, David, I forgot to ask just before the programme, are we doing an extra today?
Oh, yes.
Right, okay, we will be back on the UK Column website if you are a member for extra in about 10 minutes' time. Thank you very much to Vanessa for joining us. Thank you, David, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back at the same time, 1 p.m. as usual on Wednesday, and Brian will be back in the studio as well. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.